Welcome back to another episode of Finding Passion and Purpose, your path to spiritual growth. I'm your host, Heather Baldwin, and today's conversation is one that truly speaks to the soul. I'm honored to welcome Mark Connor, author of the deeply personal and poetic memoir, It's About Time, Thousands of Copies for Dad. This book is not just a collection of poems. Did I mess that up? I'm sorry.
Millions of copies sold.
Millions, millions of copies. This book is not just a collection of poems, it's a story of love, loss, faith, forgiveness, and the courage to finally share your truth with the world. Mark's journey weaves together boxing, Catholic faith, Irish American identity, heartbreak, mentorship, and spiritual awakening. In his words, this book was years in the making, but divinely timed. Today, we're diving into the power of delayed dreams, what it means to live and write with purpose, and how even when we feel like we're doing it badly, we're still doing something beautiful. So grab your drink, take a deep breath, and settle in for a conversation full of honesty, grace, and poetic wisdom. All right. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Heather. I really am grateful to be here.
So let's dive in again. What does the title, It's About Time, Millions of Copies for Dad, how does it connect your father and the deeper themes of the book?
Well, so I came up with the title. Well, let's just do this. I'm going to read you the very first line of the book, okay?
Yes.
Because that kind of answers the question of how I came up with the title. Because the first sentence is, I came up with the title of this book on September 30, 2019, the day my father died. So my my dad had actually started an argument with me uh, in the previous decade, maybe not quite 10 years earlier, maybe it was around 2012, about how, you've gotten old enough and been saying you're a writer all this time, and you're always talking about this novel you're working on and you're going to get published and different, you've published plenty of articles and everything, but how come you haven't published a book yet? Shouldn't you have been able to publish a few books by now? And when I saw him dying, I was just looking at him saying, I need more time. I just need more time. And I always wanted to have, I kind of fancied myself growing up as I was going to get married and have children early, and when I was, by my early 20s or so, and I still haven't gotten married or had kids. And I'm looking at him as he died, and I'm realizing he not only is he not going to see that happen, he's never going to see me and be alive to see me publish a book. And I just said to myself, this is ridiculous. I've procrastinated enough in my life. I'm going to make sure that as soon as I can, I'm going to write a book, and uh, it doesn't matter how, it's not gonna, it doesn't have to be huge or anything. It just, I'm going to write something that I know I'm going to do, that is, I can complete, and that I know I can publish and put out into the world and just see what happens. So that was it. It was just kind of, it's, originally I called it It's About Time. And it's about time. And then I added to it, It's About Time, my essay of poems. And a guy that I mentioned, who's actually one of the jacket quotes on the back, a guy named Danny Klecko, who was for a book of poetry he had a few years ago, he won the Midwest Book Award, which incidentally inspired me to enter it. And luckily, I'm a finalist in the religion philosophy category.
Nice.
The winners will be announced on June 28th. Um, but he said to me, man, it's a great book. I like it. It's really cool, but you got to change. You got to change the title, man. It's about time because, it's too esoteric. Where do you put it on a bookshelf? How do you market it and everything? And so I really thought about it, and I had It's About Time, my essay of poems. I thought that just doesn't really work. And so finally, I just one time just came up with, I'm gonna call it It's About Time, millions of copies sold for Dad, because it's about time I published a book, and why not? It's about time for millions of copies to sell too. That's how I came up with the title,
Yeah,
you know. And
that's
and
amazing.
and it's not, yeah, and it's not so much, it's not just an essay of poems. It's, I mean, because it's not really an essay. It's a story. It's a very short autobiography, and it reads like a novel,
Hmm.
and it has 20 poems running through it. So
Yeah, I like thoroughly enjoyed. I didn't even realize it was poems until I started reading it, and then I was like, "Oh, and then there's an explanation." I'm like, "This is really cool."
yeah, and so the jacket description on the back, I mean, it refers to it as a saga wrapped around a package of poems guarded by angels, and it does have the theme of guardian angels running through it too.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
So you shared that your dad challenged you about not publishing it sooner. So what really gave you that initial kick to say it's time to get this going and published?
there was literally, it was him dying. That
It
was
was,
literally it. I mean, it was I had thought over, I mean, over the previous 10 years, I really thought about what it would be like when he would die, and how difficult that would be and everything, and I just really thought I was going to be farther along in life than I actually was when it happened. And so uh that is so that was it. I mean, I had to do it as soon as he died. I had to do it. And it was really it was in 2014. So there's a story in here about my mother having kind of a medical emergency when she was on a trip with my dad, and they ended up discovering that she had heart disease, and it was really lucky that she had that things had happened as they did, because otherwise they wouldn't have found her heart problem. She had to have open heart surgery, and it gave her another 9 years. But uh, so when that and that story is there's a lot of signs of St. Jude that I talk about. And St. Jude is a family patron on both sides of my family. Um, and uh, so that now, unfortunately, I'm starting to lose a train of thought of where I was going with that. Um, could you repeat the question?
yeah. You shared that your dad challenged you.
Oh yeah,
What
yeah,
was the
yeah. He had challenged me about gotten uh, not having gotten a book published by basically by the time that I'd reached 40. And my father and I, the last 15 years of his life, we really spent a lot of time together. The thing about him is that, oh yeah, this is what I was going to say. So so we spent a lot of time together the last 15 years of his life, meeting once a week, having breakfast. The thing with him was he had said that he wasn't spending enough time with me in my adulthood. And it was really a fortunate thing for me as a son to have had a father who cared that much about being in both of his sons' lives. And he is a combat wounded Vietnam veteran, and he was discharged from the army at age 24. He was a first lieutenant platoon leader, and he was wounded a couple of months before I was born. He's wounded just a week or two before his 23rd birthday, and uh, he had my mother had persuaded him to start to go get checked out at the VA for post-traumatic stress disorder. And he had told me he didn't think they were going to diagnose him with it because he had such a stable life and a stable marriage and everything, and always was employed, that that he didn't think that he had any outward signs that were um, the normal things that were supposed to be symptoms of, well, you've got this disorder, but they did diagnose him with it, and I think that that had something to do with him reaching out to me. Who was age 36 or so, and I was uh, working with my last boxing trainer, training a professional boxer. I was uh, trying to build a personal training business as a trainer, uh, working on a novel, working on getting creative freelance writing assignments and stuff like that. And I was working a couple of jobs because all the stuff I just described wasn't making money. And uh, I just I was so busy at the time, but he really pressured me to start spending time with him. So I did that. So we've gotten really close over the last 15 years of his life. And when he died, it was really crazy because that was right. It was the end of September of 2019. If you remember what was happening in our country at that time,
Hmm.
in the next month or so, there was going to be the impeachment of the president. And then at the end of the year, um, and so my father had he had just died. Uh, we'd gotten him buried and everything, and then I ended up having uh, uh, accident at the gym, and I tore a couple ligaments in my ankle. So I was really kind of recovering at the end of the year while mourning my dad. And then the beginning of 2020 starts, and I'm just starting to kind of get together physically again and start to run and stuff like that. And then suddenly we have the shutdown um, over the coronavirus or the COVID virus. And then suddenly we ended up having the riots. And of course, I'm in St. Paul. My dad's from St. Paul. My mom's from Minneapolis. So I'm right in the middle of everything that was happening. And then I spent a lot of time working in the Native American Indian community. And one of the elders asked me to go with AIM, the American Indian Movement. AIM Patrol was guarding buildings in South Minneapolis. And so I was out with them guarding buildings during the curfew after the police station got burnt down and everything. So all that kind of stuff went on when I was in my mind I was going to write this book, but I kind of mourned over the year, and then as the year ended and coming up towards Christmas time, I said to myself, okay, I'm going to do something to make Dad happy. If he were here, he'd say, yeah, you did a good job. Um, and I said, okay, I'm going to write this book. So I started on the 9th of February, and I finished, I believe, on the 29th of March. And I got the first draft done. And then it took a while to get it published. And so I went through a lot with that. But anyway, as far as that story is concerned about about my father having that argument with me, um, I've got this little portion of the book at the end of chapter one. Um, After I just finished up this poem called "Life So Simple," I go into the narration. There were some other poems I put together qualifying for appropriate inclusion in this book. I've always held myself, of course, to the highest of standards, never believing any of these poems ready for an attempt at publication, so I never tried, which is why I so embarrassingly titled the story, It's About Time. Dad challenged me once, as far back, I believe, as 2012, asking me why, by the age of 40, I hadn't published at least one book. If I really was a writer, as I asserted myself to be, I should have been able to publish at least 5 novels or other books by then. I told him to lay off, that there were legitimate reasons for current incompletion and that literary success was on its way. But that was all an excuse. The real reason was a lie in my heart that my work was going to be great. I just needed time to concentrate, which is always delayed right now for the job or the friend in trouble or another excuse, which justified not trying. The truth is, I was scared, so I never dared. If this book which can fall flat in its face, is never presented to the public. I'll never know if you, the reader, recognize my talent. If it does, in fact, fall flat in its face, at least metaphorically, I fall flat on mine. However, so what? It's about time. So that pretty much sums up
Yeah,
the title, you know.
it's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a part in your book that talks about you did a live poetry reading at the Turf Club.
Yeah.
Uh, what did it feel like to share your words publicly for the first time?
Well, so are you I mean, so you're a little you're in Iowa and you come up to Twin Cities now and then. Are you familiar with the Turf Club or
I am not, no.
it's in the Midway area of St. Paul. Um and uh you know, it's just it's not a it's not a real huge venue or anything, and downstairs there's this little section called the Clown Lounge, and the guy who was putting on the poetry reading, he usually brings in he usually packs places. So, you know, like let's say maybe, you know, 100, you know, 100 people would be the capacity for that for that little section. You know, he'd probably have 150, 200 people trying to squeeze in there. But it was one of the snowiest, well, that was one of the snowiest winters we'd had in our lifetime, the 2019, and there was a big blizzard and everything. So probably maybe 20 people were there at best. But it felt good because it's the first time that I premiered these particular poems. It's not the first time that I actually recited poetry in public, but it was the first time I'd done it in about 10 years. So it felt good to do it, and it felt good to do it just because I was kind of breaking through a period I'd had when I wasn't writing that much and I wasn't being creative for a while. Actually, uh, this is 2020, so 3 years earlier, I'd written the second poem that appears in this book, and it had broken a writer's block that I'd had for a long time, and it's just one of those things that uh, getting getting up in public and expressing myself through the words of of a couple of poems I put together that I feel confident about. It's just a good thing to do it and to uh, kind of just get it communicated to the world and just see what the reaction is. And it's a really a confidence building thing and a reaffirming thing to do it because sometimes people aren't going to like it either, you know. And if they do like it, that's cool. If they don't, that's okay. But at least I got it out there, and people did. They were pretty receptive to these particular poems anyway, so that was cool, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where we have to push ourselves through those little scary moments and then realize, like, that really felt good. Like, why
Yeah.
was I kind of nervous or scared about it? And I think a lot of people don't push themselves through those little scary or nerve-wracking moments in
Well,
life.
yeah, and that's something that we face all the time in our lives anyway, because I go through that all the time, and yet I started boxing when I was 10 years old. So I got up and I stepped in front of a crowd to fight someone else right when I was 10, 5th grade,
Right.
and did that into my adulthood. So I got used to having that kind of pressure publicly, and sometimes that kind of embarrassment because there were times I got defeated. Not the majority of times, but there were times I got defeated and it was not a good feeling. But that's something about boxing that I believe if I wouldn't have been a boxer, I wouldn't have done half the things I've done in my life. I don't think I'd be as secure with myself or have survived life as well as I have. Not that I've necessarily been through the greatest of trials, and I find a very similarity to that. I find there to be a similarity between that or that with that and the recitation of poetry in front of a crowd, the performance thing, because and I kind of get charged up in the same way, but it's different because it's not the same physical challenge. But
Right, right. No, but I get that. Like, yeah, I just think it's important to, if you don't have that as a child, to stand up even in front of a few people to do whatever. Like my biggest challenge was singing in front of the entire school when I was, young. And so if I had not done that, I probably wouldn't have done a lot of things because I realized, oh, that didn't kill me. It was fine. you know?
yeah, well, isn't it cool that you did it? I'm just so happy that you did
Yeah.
it. So is that you talking about way back in high school, or are you talking about?
Like elementary and into high school. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, well,
So
oh, go on, go
uh,
on.
go ahead.
You wanted to ask the next question, but I was just gonna say, referring to the story I told about my dad and wanting to get together with me and everything in the last 15 years of his life and everything. And also something that I think is pertinent to what we just talked about in terms of confidence and how boxing helped me with confidence. My dad allowing me to do that and, taking me to the gym and take me to meet the coach and to the gym and everything to start out because I begged him to do it and he was always there supporting me like that and always in my life. Um, this is the portion of the story that kind of leads up to our deciding to have breakfast together once a week. Um, Constantly tired. Also, just to preface it for the audience, um, I had been trying to get away from the youth care work that I did. I worked at this place called Anda Young, which is first word is AIN, second word is DAH, last word is YUNG. It's Ojibwe for our home. So it was a temporary emergency homeless shelter for youth aged 5 to 17, and it's a Native American Indian program. And so the kids who came in there could be any background, but it was primarily Native American kids came in there. Um, I'm going to refer to a kid here who was an African American kid. I don't know if he was American Indian at all or not. So this is the story. Constantly tired, always worried that I wasn't writing enough or wasn't at the gym enough. Frustrated that I wasn't pulling in enough money on my freelance endeavors to quit my straight job. I was at that shelter every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 11 p.m., working till 8 a.m. the next morning. One night, at least a year into that overnight position, there was a little black boy, 5 years old and placed in shelter just that day, who slept on the couch because he was too scared to be on the boys' floor in the darkness of the old house. And while I was in the kitchen doing the dishes after midnight, I heard him crying hysterically through the sound of the water spraying up pots and pans. I remember there was nothing I could do, so I just kneeled on the floor next to the couch and gave him a hug and rocked back and forth, saying, "You're a good boy. You're a good boy." At the time, on Monday mornings, Dad would pick me up at my apartment after work and take me to breakfast. I'd been doing so many things, reaching the middle of my 30s and trying to establish myself to the level I thought I should have reached in my 20s. So I was very busy. Dad told me he wasn't spending enough time with me in my adult years and wanted me to commit to seeing him once a week. That was a time when Dad altered his approach to many issues in life, even, eventually, at Mom's insistence, going to counseling at the VA and getting evaluated for post-traumatic stress disorder. Even though he'd been married his entire adult life, had no chemical dependencies, and was never unemployed, which were considered the biggest indicators, at least on the surface level, he said, they diagnosed him with it. That's understandable because he saw a lot of fighting and death in Vietnam and almost died there before his 24th birthday. But I told him he was crazy. There was no way I could commit to seeing him once a week. I just didn't have the time. Why not? Because, Dad, I'm trying to do so many things. I just don't have the time. Fine, he said. I guess you can come spend time with me at my funeral. That hit me hard. I committed to his request and we had breakfast together once a week for the last 15 years of his life. That's the best decision I ever made. Anyway, he picked me up Monday morning after the weekend I'd worked when I had to comfort that 5-year-old boy alone at the shelter. He said, "Hi," and we sat for a moment as I told him about it, and I just couldn't help it. I started to cry a little. It was good to be with my dad. I always knew who he was and that he was always in my life and I was always his son. I never had any confusion about who I was or to whose family I belonged. Later that year, so yeah, just leave it there. So I
Yeah.
never had any confusion about who I was or to whose family I belonged. And that's one thing that I believe kind of like, so you asked me about what it felt like to get up and recite these poems at that lounge and everything and share it with the public like that. Um, just having the notion that I could get up and do that, or having the notion I get in the ring and fight, or now having the notion that I could actually train boxers or ask people who are just white collar professionals who want to be in shape and no self defense. Yeah, trust me to teach you this. All that kind of thing is really important I mean, I'm gonna think about that poor 5-year-old boy. And that was I believe it was probably 2005, so he'd be about 30 years old now. And I oftentimes wonder uh, how he is, where he is. I pray to God that one night, because see, that was on the weekend, and then I came back the next weekend because I was doing my other work during the week, and I come back and work that weekend job. He was gone. And he was gone because when a child that young would come into shelter, the caseworkers would do everything they could to get that child placed somewhere right away because it's so traumatic at that age to not
Right.
know where your parents are and stuff like that. So I think uh, that's one of the things that's why a portion of the title is millions of copies sold for dad because I'd I'd like to be able to I've got the book published and I'm saying something about the relationship I had with him and I'd like as many people to be able to relate to it and hopefully if if
Well,
yeah
yeah, and even if they can't relate to it, it's such a special relationship that, people can, if they don't have that themselves, they can at least know that, maybe there are men out there who are good fathers, that not every, maybe their experience is every man is a bad dad, whatever their situation is.
yeah
But your story can be an example of like, no, not every man is a bad dad. There's excellent fathers out there who care about their children, and their children know that they're, special.
yeah and hopefully I mean my real hope is to see I'm expressing a worldview with this book, and not everyone's going to necessarily share that same worldview. But I hope and I believe that I have accomplished this with the way this book is presented. But my real intention is that anyone who reads it, if you don't really quite identify with the experience I had or the observations I make about faith and which obviously is a statement on what I believe reality to be if you don't quite uh, if you don't quite uh, fully grasp it, I hope that you feel respected by me as an author when you read it, and that you feel encouraged, and that you leave the reading of this book with hope, because that's what I'm really trying to give people with this book is hope.
Right. So that leads me to the next question. So, many of your poems, they explore heartbreak and healing, and did writing them feel like therapy, or Did it bring up more emotions? Uh, was there a poem that was the hardest to write? And I can personally say, on page 21, that was probably an emotional poem for me to read in your book. So,
Doing it badly. Yeah, that's a cool one. So I got that. Yeah, doing it badly, written April 21, 2018. Yeah, anything worth doing is worth doing badly, G.K. Chesterton would say. His most redeeming quality as an Englishman was his support for Irish freedom. His second most redeeming quality was his wisdom. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly. So it was with you, even though what I decided to do drove you away. I have seemed a beast with a horn, just a losing warrior all battle torn, stumbling clumsily through emotional folly, not willing to admit the moment had passed and it was time to go home. You were another purpose for me, a budding young lady of beauty and need, rejecting my heart and the love I did bleed, clutching your pain as if it were greed, me standing still alone. Maybe I was supposed to just walk away, get to bed early, greet the new day, but something in your touch, something in your sigh, something about something in your smile behind your dark eyes said you were worth it. Yes, it is true, both for me and for you. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Uh, G.K. Chesterton, I actually, I was, this kind of shows you how I, in the re-embracing of my faith. So I've raised Catholic and always was Catholic, never fully abandoned my faith. There are times when I was kind of straying away a little bit or not going to mass all the time and so forth. But and then I got involved with the Native American Indian community. There's kind of a solidarity built up between American Indians and the Irish, and I was a bit involved with some of the activists locally who were trying to raise awareness about the troubles when the troubles were going on in Ireland, uh, through that I kind of ended up meeting some American Indians who I befriended, and so I had gotten taken down to these Sundance ceremonies in Rosebud and Pine Ridge Reservations in South Dakota. And as I worked at the shelter, there were opportunities to go to sweat lodges and stuff like that, and I was kind of leaning towards following that tradition more so than the Catholic tradition, but then I kind of reinforced my faith when I was back working there in the part-time overnight position um, between 2004 and 2007. And I started watching, and well, I guess I actually mentioned this too in the, then this is when I really re-embraced it was probably around 2000. It was definitely around 2007, real turning point in my life. But I mentioned this in the book that I started occasionally, while alone in my apartment, I'd turn on EWTN, which I'd first seen my senior year of high school. My parents had just gotten cable TV and they watched it once in a while. But EWTN is Eternal Word Television Network, which is the Catholic, free Catholic uh, cable station. And there's a guy named Dale Alquist who's located in Minnesota who started the Chesterton Foundation. And he actually started the schools, the Chesterton Academy. There's a bunch of them around the country now. Um, and he would do this show it was a series of shows about G.K. Chesterton, who was do you know who Chesterton is?
no. Mm-mm.
So he's actually his cause for sainthood has actually been opened, and he was an English writer, um, born in the 1800s. He died, like, I think, in 1939, and he just, I mean, just fabulous writer of major journalist, and then novelist, short story writer, playwright, poet, and everything. And uh, Alquist in one of those shows is saying, he brought that up. He said that Chesterton said anything worth doing is worth doing badly. So that's where I got that from. And
Nice.
and yeah, and I just, the whole point is, like, you got to take your shot in life, basically. And um trying to be a good person, you might do it badly. You're a human being, but you just, you you're putting forth the effort. That's the whole point of it. And
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So, was there a poem that was which one was the hardest to write for you?
I don't know what one's the hardest to write. I'd say the ones that I feel like they're not as the ones in here that I feel like they're not as poignant as or kind of hitting the point quite as sharply as the other ones. Those are the ones I would call the hardest to write, and they're not necessarily the hardest emotionally. They're just kind of the hardest to kind of where I'm just more reaching or grasping for words. So, like, there's a one, I think, towards the end. I think it's the last one. Is I think it's called "A Man Keeping His Fantasies." Um, I think that was probably harder to write because I just feel like I don't. It's not as much. The reason I feel like it's the hardest to write is because it's not as high a quality as the other ones, in my opinion, or I'm not quite as satisfied with it. But the ones that are, I suppose, emotionally speaking, the ones that I think are the best ones were probably the hardest to write. But when I wrote them, when I uh, found the synchronicity to write them, and they're the most enjoyable ones, right? Are the ones where I felt really like I accomplished something. So so in that respect, when you say was it therapeutic, in that way, I'd say writing these poems is therapeutic. I
Yeah.
was thinking about that when you'd sent me the questions before this, so I had an idea what you might be asking me. I really was pondering that one because I was thinking, how am I going to answer that? Because I don't like the idea of saying, "Oh, I do this for therapy."
Yeah. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Like, I really enjoy poetry, and when I wrote poems back in the day, like, they weren't necessarily hard to write, but they were like they're emotional, and they do, it's just like journaling. It helps you get your thoughts out, but there's like a dance to it versus just writing out your thoughts.
yeah,
Writing a poem, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. But doing it badly was actually, when I came up with it, it it kind of came to me, fairly easily. I was in Reno, Nevada at the time, and I remember looking in the mirror and kind of reciting. I just kind of came up with it, and I wrote it out and everything, and just kind of figured, you know, practiced it and memorized it and everything.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. So.
So, yeah, you were talking about your Catholic faith, and it's a clear thread throughout the your poems and the story. And so, and then you talk about the Native Americans that you worked with. So, how is, all these different spiritualities shaped your writing process and perspective?
Uh, uh, so just you say the Catholic faith and the Native American faith. You know, uh, it's kind of the attempt to always achieve verisimilitude, right? And verisimilitude is just it's the concept in literature of arriving at a statement of truth. You know, and both the thing about me being entering into and accepting uh, uh, it was been particularly the tradition was the Lakota tradition, uh, accepting Native American Indian uh, belief or its approach to a spiritual approach to God was one as a Catholic. Um, I was taught to respect other religions, even though we didn't necessarily consider them to be or think of them as because we thought of Catholicism as, you know, the origins of Christianity uh, uh, the totality of truth, right? Um, but that there's truth in other people's religious traditions, and that all people are actually longing for and looking for God. Um, there's actually there's actually a portion towards the end of the book when I talk about uh, remembering my father uh, calming me when I was probably 4 years old at Mass, and how I looked up at the priest who was giving his homily, and he was saying that uh, God is always reaching out to man, and man is always, you know, longing for God. And uh, actually, I won't search through the book to find that actual passage, but it's a really cool passage because it was during one of our weekly breakfasts, and I said that to my dad, and he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You can remember that far back?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Boy, you have a real, that's a real grace." He says, "You have a real gift of faith, you know," and uh, because he couldn't believe that I could remember that far back. Um, and I mentioned also Bishop Robert Barron, who is really popularly known. He's done a bunch of documentaries and stuff. I mentioned him as the auxiliary bishop of Los Angeles in this book, but um, just because I wrote it before, when I wrote it, he still was, but then like a year later, he was transferred to Rochester, Winona, Minnesota. He's the bishop there, and he says he did this long series that was on PBS, I believe, called Catholicism. It was like a 5-part series or something. And he said in the Catholic faith, we look at other faiths and we find the truth in it. And we say, okay, that we recognize that truth and we respect that truth. And then we try to point over here and say, here, this is where we believe the totality of truth is. And to have that conversation. So I always had that understanding. And uh, as a Catholic, when I was in the Native American circle, and then there was also in the sweat lodge. One thing that was emphasizes that, you know, the ancestors come into the sweat lodge as the singing and the praying is happening, and listen to the prayers, and then at the end go back to the Creator. So they're taking the prayers of the people back to God. And I thought of that as very parallel to our perception of what the communion of saints is. You know, in all mainstream Christianity, like I've got a really close friend. He's a boxing trainer. He was a boxing trainer for years in New York. He's now in Tennessee. Now, I actually mentioned his name in the book at one point. He just just goes crazy about, you know, saints, you're praying to saints and all that kind of, but mainline Christianity believes in the community of saints, and uh, that's something that, you know, you have to think of God as a family, and you think of the Trinity as a family, and that we are all as being made in the likeness, image and likeness of God. We're all part of the family of God. So that was part of the comfort and ease that I had to be within that community and still never be letting go of my Catholic faith, and to feel just perfectly comfortable going to mass and not feeling like I've gone and done something sacrilegious by
Right,
participating in someone else's
right.
religious ceremony with respect, and with the respect that, okay, I'm not, I mean, I didn't. I'm not indigenous to this land in this country, and I'm not. It's not my tradition. It's yours. So I'm not going to take it over and try to go around and tell people, hey, this. I'm not the master and
Right.
explainer of the whole thing. Right.
Right. So, let's see. So you were talking about your friends and mentors and um, strangers. Who is one person besides your dad who helped you make this book possible?
Oh, oh. Well, I had mentioned um the the poet I mentioned who had helped me with this and who had won the Midwest Book Award.
Yeah.
I already mentioned him and his, but I don't think I said his name, and that's not the man I'm going to name. And that's not the man I'm going to say is the one person. But although he was helpful, is Danny Klecko. But no, the person who was so helpful with this book and helping me to get it published is Dan Flynn. Dan Flynn, he's got to be about 10 years older than I am. Um, he was, so the high school I went to is called St. Thomas Academy, and had graduated probably 10 years before I did. And the only year, so when I started boxing at 10 years old, and I had just started playing football. We'd had one football game, then I had the chance to learned boxing, and I just quit football altogether. But at St. Thomas Academy, I went there. They've got a middle school and then a high school, and my when I started the seventh grade there, and then in my freshman year, um, football was such a prestigious thing there, and I kind of thought the girls at the girls' school might like me more if I tried football. So even though I hadn't played football all these years, I tried football and a lot of skills I didn't to pick up, and so I was third string running back, and I was third string linebacker. But Dan Flynn was that year an assistant coach, and he really admired me and admired the determination I had and the effort I put into it and everything. And years later, I connected up with him on social media, and uh, he is the author of a book called uh, Famous Minnesotans, Past and Present. And his brother, actually, so St. Thomas Academy is a uh, JROTC uh, military high school. The high school portion is. And his younger brother, Vince Flynn, he was my company commander my freshman year. He was a senior, and Vince Flynn had become a really successful spy novelist. And again, I have to say, God rest his soul, because a number of years ago he died. But Dan, I he's the first guy that I brought the manuscript to, and he really liked it. And he actually said to me, I think you've written something really good here. I think you've written something really profound, and uh, I think you should do everything you can to get it published. And that was a real reinforcement to me, because honestly, some of the stuff I wrote about, some of the beautiful women I wrote about in here, and the love and loss, uh, and just the vulnerability, and having written it after my dad had died, and it was I just wasn't sure about it, and I wanted someone to read it who was going to tell me straight up, honestly, is this something that I should feel comfortable presenting to the public or not? And he said, no, yeah, you should really get this thing published. So Dan Flynn, without a doubt, is one person that really helped me with this book, really helped me get it published. And a couple of guys actually that are associated with that school, and one classmate of mine, and a couple of older guys that had gone to that school long before I was there, helped me with it. And my dad always said to me, when I told him of a connection I made through that school, or something else that he'd had some influence on that gave me some kind of success, he'd always laugh and say, "See, Mark, everything good you got from me." So
I love it. Yeah. So now that your book is out, how's it felt to see people respond to your story and poetry? And have you had any surprise responses?
Man, it's felt really good. It's felt really good. Uh, I've had some surprise responses. And the surprise responses have been um, people that I admire, people that kind of out of the blue have told me they really liked it, or hey, I read your book, and and good job and everything, and and yeah, it's something that, I mean, I did another podcast interview and uh, recently, and the guy who did it, he sent me a comment from someone that had read it, and it was a young lady somewhere in her, I mean, she somewhere between early 20s, early 30s, had made a comment on his website saying, "I really like. I'm going to check out this guy's book. I really like." The way he, because having listened to the interview, I really like the way he tells a story. It's soothing, and I thought, wow, that was really cool. What a compliment that was. And I haven't uh, I haven't gotten the mass audiences yet. But I just figure I said to Dan Flynn when I was well, see, originally I was going to get this thing published in 2022, and I had a small local sole proprietor publisher was going to publish it with me, and didn't want to hire an outside editor, and was making these edits that were just unacceptable, and were kind of changing the voice and everything, and we split up and went our separate ways, and and this individual was telling me, you're trying to have creative control, and you're an unknown author, and no one in the publishing world is going to work with you. And it was really disheartening. And it was kind of cathartic, that whole experience. It was the end of 2022, right at Christmas time. And so I went through Christmas, and it was kind of, resting up and gearing up to try to get it published again. And then my mother had been diagnosed at this point with pulmonary hypertension, which is a fatal heart disease. And just when I'm getting ready to, I'm going to really make this effort. At the end of March, late March, she ended up in the hospital till the 2nd of June. And then I took care of her when she came out until uh, she ended up collapsing into my arms, and she was pronounced dead a little after midnight on the 22nd of October of 2023. And so I went through all this stuff, and finally, Dan Flynn told me, he says, "You're gonna have to do this like the way Vince did, and go through a you're gonna have to go through a established, a new established uh, LLC, brand new independent publishing house, and you got to do it yourself, basically." So he kind of helped me do that, and some other, like I said, some other people helped me with it, and a classmate of mine from high school who owns a marketing company said, "Okay, I'm going to do this. For what I'm going to do is I like it. I'm going to help you out by printing up all these marketing copies for you and everything." So I kind of got that boost, and I got it released in June of 2024, so just last year. And I entered this Irish Network Minnesota, what's called the Bloomsday Award. It's a James Joyce Literary Award, and I actually got that award with it, which was really nice. But it was a lot I went through to get it published, and Dan was really supportive, was telling me you did the right thing by walking away from this other publisher because, uh, it wasn't right for you, and an editor should be accentuating your voice, not putting one's own voice into it. And that's probably the best approach towards editing. And you stuck with it. And so that was the experience of actually getting it published, man. It was really hard to do. Um, but it's done. And the one thing I had said to I've gone on a long story here, but to get back to the point what I was going to make is that I was talking to Dan Flynn about this. Like I said, I haven't got the mass audience yet, but I was telling Dan Flynn before it was published, I figure once I've got this published, my full-time job for the rest of my life is to sell it. So I'm just gonna keep doing stuff like talking to you and other people who will talk to me on
Yeah,
camera like this, and just try to convince people to buy it and to give her a read. And I'll tell you, so everyone watching, it's about time Millions of Copies Sold for Dad. You can get it if you go to my website. Box all spelled out, boxersandwritersmagazine.com is the website. You click onto it, you'll find the book. What you're looking for is you go boxersandwritersmagazine.com and put a slash books. You go right to the books page. And the way to buy it online, when you get to that page, you'll have an option to click on Amazon, or if you don't want to give your money to Jeff Bezos, you can click on something called Lulu, Lulu. The only thing about Lulu is you'll get a paperback like this, and you can get a paperback like this on Amazon, but you can also get it on Kindle if you want to for less money on Amazon. And it wasn't a books. The only bookstore it was in St. Paul is just closed. So I'm working on getting in other bookstores now.
nice.
So
Yeah, and we'll definitely put all that information in the show notes so that people can check it out.
one more thing that I want to say to people to try to appeal to people to buy it and to read it is, first of all, I think you're going to like the book. So I think you'll enjoy it and everything. Second of all, if you are too busy, you don't get around to reading it. If you look at my friend who actually got me that job at Young, he's back up in Canada now. He's a Canadian Ojibwe named Eric Keast. He painted the picture, which is the cover art, and it's really cool. It's a really cool cover. So you should judge a book by its cover, I say.
Yeah,
And if you don't get around to reading it, you just put this out on your coffee table or, where people can see it, and you're going to have great conversations with people where you can actually just enjoy just looking at it.
yeah,
I could spend, an afternoon looking at that. And the final thing I'll say, look, man, buy the book and read it because you know what? If nothing else, if you take it to bed with you, it'll help put you to sleep.
well, I'm going to ask one more question before
Okay.
we go. What advice would you give someone who feels called to share their story and maybe write a book, but is still hesitating to do it?
Do it now. Just do it now. And to elaborate just a little bit, first of all, tell your story now because if you don't tell this story, you can't tell the next one, right?
Right,
And you start, but once you take that first step, you build up the momentum. So you get one story told, you can start telling another story, and that's how it goes. That's how it begins. And Natalie Goldberg, I mentioned her at a certain point in this book. I read a book in my 20s called "Writing Down the Bones" by Natalie Goldberg, and she's a poet. That's actually a million copy bestseller, and she actually says in there, "Write shit, write that." You can write the terrible stuff, because every great writer writes just terrible stuff that you're never good, but you never see it, right?
right. Hmm.
And you never see it because that's not what gets published. But the writer is writing all the time, and most of what the great writers write gets thrown away. It hits the wastebasket or it gets deleted because the great ones, they're writing all day long and then they're honing it down and they only show you at what's absolutely the best that
Right.
they can produce. So
Exactly.
yeah. So the long and the short of it, after saying all that stuff in so many words, I should just say, take the step and do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes things are scary, but we got to do scary, hard things so that we
Right.
can move on and evolve.
Well, another thing is, so I've got a Substack. It's Irish Catholic Punch Drunk at St. Paul, and the very first, and I haven't written nearly enough on it. I'm not as consistent with it as I should be, but the very first article I wrote, I says, you know, some people might be saying, be careful, don't offend people and everything with what you're writing, but uh, uh, it's a fear I have as if, you know, the stuff that I'm writing that nobody's reading, it's like all gonna, it's like, I mean, if no one's gonna read it anyway, if no one reads it, don't be embarrassed about it because, no one even knows you did it then. If it, I mean, if it,
True. True.
you know,
Yeah, and I think, a lot of us don't do things because we're afraid we're gonna offend somebody. Well, someone's always gonna be offended by
right,
something that somebody does, whether it's religion or politics or just the way a person thinks, it's always gonna be something's gonna offend somebody somewhere. So just do it.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. And of course, everything will be in the show notes. Like, subscribe, follow, do all the things. And until next time, I love you and have a blessed day.